A billionaire's daughter meets a poor girl who looks just like her. They switch places for 2 days, and what happens is unbelievable. The alarm clock went off at 6:30 sharp in Emily's room. She opened her eyes and stared at the white ceiling, decorated with stars that glowed in the dark. They weren't glowing anymore at that time of the morning. She sat up in her king-size bed, far too large for a 10-year-old girl, and looked out her bedroom window. The garden outside was perfect, with flowers trimmed just right, not a single leaf out of place. "Miss Emily, time to get ready." The voice of Martha, the nanny, came from the hallway before Emily could even properly stretch. The Parker residence was enormous. 3 floors, 7 bedrooms, a pool in the back, and a view of the lake that made the neighbors green with envy. Emily walked down the stairs, dragging her fingers along the polished wooden railing. Her footsteps echoed on the marble floor. The sound reminded her of how empty the house was. "Your father has already left. He left this for you." Martha pointed to an envelope on the dining table. Emily picked up the paper. Inside was a gift card to an expensive store and a note. "Sorry I missed your recital yesterday. Buy yourself something nice, Dad." Emily looked at the card, her face blank. It was the 3rd recital he had missed. Martha served breakfast, toast with imported raspberry jam, freshly squeezed orange juice and scrambled eggs. Emily ate in silence while the nanny checked the day's schedule. "Today we have piano lessons at 4, swimming at 5:30, and dinner at 7. Your father called to say he'll be home late again." Emily nodded. It was always like this. 3 miles away, in a weathered brick building in the south side of the city, Lila woke up to the sound of a sewing machine. The apartment had only 1 bedroom, where her parents slept in an old bed, while Lila used the living room sofa, which turned into a bed at night. "Mom, you started early today," Lila said, rubbing her eyes as she folded the patched blanket. Sarah Thompson looked up from the sewing machine. She had dark circles under her eyes, but she smiled when she saw her daughter. "I have to deliver this dress by noon. The client pays extra for rush deliveries." Mark appeared from the kitchen with a mug of cheap coffee. Since the factory had closed 8 months ago, he had been looking for a job every day, without success. Good morning, Princess," even tired and worried. His eyes always lit up when he saw his daughter. "I made some oatmeal for breakfast." Lila sat at the makeshift table. This used to be the time she would get ready for school, but after Mark lost his job, there was no money left for the uniform and the books or the bus fare. The public school was too far to walk, and the bus cost more than they could afford. "Are we going to study geography today?" Lila asked, trying to sound cheerful. Her mother did her best to teach her at home, between sewing jobs. "Of course, dear sweetie, after I finish this dress." Lila looked at the small calendar on the kitchen wall. Saturday was marked with a red circle. "How, you didn't forget, did you?" she asked, hopeful. Her parents exchanged quick glances. "The amusement park, of course we didn't forget," Sarah said, but her smile faltered. "We're saving up for the tickets." Mark pursed his lips. Since he lost his job, he couldn't even give his daughter the most basic things, let alone an expensive trip to an amusement park. In the afternoon, Emily sat at the grand piano in her family's music room. Her fingers moved with precision, but without passion. Through the window, she could see children walking home from school, laughing and talking. She wished she were out there. "Focus, Emily," the teacher requested. "You have talent, but you need to apply yourself more." Emily looked back at the keys. She played the entire piece without missing a note. The teacher applauded, satisfied. Emily felt nothing. After the lesson, Martha took her to swimming at an exclusive club. In the imported car, Emily sat in silence as watching the houses pass by the window. She thought about what it would be like to have someone waiting for her at home. Someone who would ask how her day was and actually want to know the answer. While Emily swam in a heated pool, Lila flipped through an old geography book with missing pages that her mother had found at a thrift store. She missed school and her friends, the teacher who always praised her drawings, but she never complained. She knew her parents already felt guilty enough. "I'm going to deliver this dress," said Sarah, putting the sewing into a plastic bag. "You stay with your dad. I'll be back soon." Mark was in the living room, reading the newspaper for job ads. When Sarah left, he closed the paper and smiled at his daughter. "How about we plant those beans you wanted?" Lila's face lit up. She ran to get 3 empty yogurt cups she had been saving. Mark helped her fill them with damp cotton balls and place the beans inside. "Now let's put them near the window to get some sun," he said, as Lila carefully carried the cups. From the window you could see a billboard for the new park. A golden carousel sparkled in the image, with smiling children riding on colorful horses. "Jenny used to sit with me at recess," Lila said, looking at the billboard. "She told me she went to the new park last weekend. She said the carousel is the biggest in the city." Mark swallowed hard. "I'm trying, Princess. I have another interview today." Lila turned and hugged her father. "I know, Dad, I'm not sad." But they both knew it was a lie. When evening came, Emily had dinner alone at the enormous table. Martha served the meal and then retreated to the kitchen. The sound of silverware on the plate was the only noise in the dining hall. Emily looked at the clock. 8:30. Her father had promised to be home at 7. She finished eating, brushed her teeth, and went to bed. Martha appeared to turn off the lights. "Good night, Miss Emily." "Martha, do you think my dad will remember my birthday next week?" The nanny hesitated for a second. "Of course he will. Now get some sleep." When the door closed, Emily stared at the stars on the ceiling. They were beginning to glow faintly. She thought about what it would be like to have someone who cared, someone who truly saw her, not just as an obligation or an item on a busy schedule. In the Thompson apartment, Mark returned, crestfallen. He didn't get the job. "They said I'll get an email," he muttered to Sarah, but they both knew what that meant. Even so, when Lila appeared in the living room, he forced a smile. "Who wants to play cards?" Sitting on the still open sofa bed, the family played a game of Uno with faded, torn cards. The laughter was real, despite their worries. "Time for bed, young lady," Sarah announced when they finished the game. "So just 5 more minutes," Lila pleaded, snuggling up to her father. Mark hugged his daughter. "Tomorrow, your dad has to wake up early. More interviews." "Okay." Lila settled into bed as her parents got up to go to their room. "Dad," she called before Mark left, "you don't have to worry about the park, it's okay." Mark came back and knelt beside the makeshift bed. "You deserve good things, you know that, and I'm going to get them for you." After her parents left, Lila took out a crumpled flyer for the park she had found on the street. The paper shone with the promise of fun and magic. She closed her eyes, imagining what it would be like to ride that golden carousel. The next morning, Emily woke to the sound of rain on the window. Her father had already left. There was another envelope on the table, another gift card, another apology. She put the card in a drawer along with the others. She had a collection by now. She looked at the grey sky through the window. Saturday would be her birthday. Her father had promised to take her to the new park that had opened. Emily doubted he would remember. Still, something inside her still hoped for it. What she didn't know was that, just a few miles away, another girl was looking at the same sky, dreaming of the same park, with no idea that a chance meeting would change both their lives forever. Saturday arrived with a perfect blue sky. Robert Parker looked at his watch and sighed. He had promised to spend the day with Emily, to take her to Central Park in the morning. But an emergency at work changed everything. "I'm so sorry, Princess. Martha will take you." He handed some money to the nanny. "Buy her some ice cream. It's her birthday." Emily watched her father walk out the front door. He didn't even look her in the eye. She tried to hide her disappointment. She was used to it by now. "Let's go, Miss Emily. The park is beautiful this time of year, with the spring flowers. We can take a walk around the lake." In the car, Emily clutched the gift her father had given her. A bracelet far too expensive for a 10-year-old girl. She would have traded it for 5 minutes of genuine attention. In the small Thompson apartment, Lila could hardly believe it. Her father had come in smiling, holding an envelope. "I got a temp job. I start on Monday." Mark showed her a few bills. "I thought we could go to Central Park today. Pack a lunch. Spend the afternoon by the lake." Lila screamed with joy and jumped into her father's arms. Sarah smiled, tears in her eyes. It was the first good news in months. "We'll spend the whole day there," Mark said, spinning his daughter in the air. "We can rent a little boat to row on the lake." Central Park was a green oasis in the middle of the city. Stone paths wound between well-kept lawns, colorful flower beds and old trees that offered generous shade. In the center, a lake with calm waters reflected the sky. Martha walked a few steps ahead of Emily, pointing to the flowers and explaining their scientific names. Emily just nodded, watching the families enjoying the day. Parents spreading blankets on the grass, children chasing ducks, elderly people feeding pigeons. She felt a familiar emptiness in her chest. "Would you like to take a turn on the lake, Miss Emily? We can rent a boat." Emily shrugged. "Whatever." The Thompsons entered the park hand in hand, breathing in the fresh air. For them, having the time and money for a day like this was a rare luxury. "Look over there, Lila. The little boats on the lake." Sarah pointed to the small, colorful vessels. Lila's eyes sparkled. "Can we row one?" "Of course we can," Mark smiled. "It's your special day." Emily watched the swans on the lake, sitting on a bench while Martha went to buy water from a stall. The children around her laughed and played while their parents took pictures. She felt envious, not of the fun, but of the genuine joy she saw on their faces. It was then that she noticed the girl in the simple blue dress walking with her parents by the lake's edge. Something about her caught her attention, the way she smiled, the shape of her face. Emily moved closer, as if pulled by a magnet. Lila bent down to throw breadcrumbs to the ducks, laughing as they approached. She looked around, taking in every detail of the park, when her eyes met those of another girl watching her near a statue. For a moment, she thought she was looking in a mirror. Lila stood up and walked directly toward the other girl, leaving her parents behind. They stood face to face in silence, studying each other. Same height, same face shape, same brown eyes, same small nose. "You," Emily began, not knowing what to say. "Look like me," Lila finished, equally astonished. A group of cyclists passed between them, breaking the moment. Emily glanced back, where Martha was still waiting in the line for water. "My name is Emily," she said, extending her hand as she had learned to do with her father's friends. "I'm Lila." Ignoring the outstretched hand, Lila suddenly hugged her. Emily tensed for a second, then relaxed. Mark and Sarah approached, worried about their daughter's sudden disappearance. "Lila, don't just run off without telling us." Sarah's voice died away when she saw the two girls together. "Oh my goodness." Mark blinked several times, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "They're identical," Sarah completed. Martha returned with the water and also froze when she saw the scene. "Miss Emily?" The girls smiled, as if sharing a secret. "Can we talk for a bit?" Emily asked, surprising herself with the initiative. Sitting by the lake's edge, their feet dangling over the water, Emily and Lila discovered they had the same birthday, both turning 10 that day. While the adults talked, trying to understand the coincidence, the girls spoke as if they had known each other for years. "So your dad's a businessman?" Lila asked, throwing a pebble into the water and watching the ripples form. "Yes, but he's never home." Emily threw a stone too. "And you don't go to school anymore?" "Not since my dad lost his job." Lila shrugged. "But he just got a new one." Emily looked at the Thompsons. They looked tired, with simple clothes, but they smiled all the time, and Lila's father couldn't stop looking at his daughter, as if wanting to make sure she was happy. "Your house must be amazing," Lila commented, following Emily's gaze to the nanny, who wore elegant clothes. "It's big and empty." Emily sighed. "Your apartment must be noisy." "It's small, but never quiet." Lila smiled. For a moment they fell silent, each thinking about the other's life. It was Lila who spoke first, lowering her voice. "What if we switched?" Emily frowned. "What do you mean?" "Just for today. I'll go with your nanny to your house. You'll go with my parents to my apartment." "They'll notice." Lila shook her head. "Shall not if we switch clothes? Look, even our hair is similar. Yours is just neater." Emily glanced at Martha, who was talking distractedly with the Thompsons. The idea was crazy, impossible, and strangely tempting. "Why do you want to do this?" Emily asked. Lila shrugged. "Kai, I've always wanted to know what it's like to live in a big house." Then, more seriously, "And don't you want to know what it's like to have someone who really pays attention to you?" The comment hit Emily hard. How did Lila know exactly what she felt? What if it goes wrong? "It's just for one day. We'll come back here tomorrow and switch back." Lila smiled, confident. "No one will find out." Emily hesitated. It was crazy, it was risky, it was exactly what she wanted. Okay. They ran to the public restroom in the park. Emily put on Lila's simple blue dress, and Lila put on Emily's expensive clothes. They even swapped shoes. They looked at themselves in the mirror, fixing their hair to look exactly like the other. "You have to smile more," Lila instructed. "I'm always smiling." "And you need to say please and excuse me all the time," Emily said. "Martha notices that." When they came out, the adults were already waiting for them near a fountain. "Time to go, Lila," Sarah called, holding out her hand. Martha checked her watch. "Miss Emily, we have to go. Your father called to ask if you liked your gift." The girls exchanged a final conspiratorial look. Emily walked over to Sarah and Mark, her heart pounding as the woman took her hand. Lila went to Martha, maintaining the upright posture she had seen Emily use. No one noticed the switch. As they walked away in opposite directions, each looked back one last time, nervous and excited about the adventure that was just beginning. Martha's car glided through the automatic gate of the Parker mansion. Lila resisted the urge to press her face against the window. She tried to imitate the indifferent expression she had seen on Emily during the afternoon. "We're here, Miss Emily," Martha announced, parking the car in the circular driveway in front of a double door of dark wood. Lila got out of the car and looked at the house. 3 stories of light-colored brick, huge windows, a garden that looked like it was out of a magazine. She swallowed hard. How could someone live in a place like this and not smile all the time? "Your father called again. He said he'll try to make it for dinner." Martha opened the front door, holding it for Lila to enter. The entrance hall was larger than the Thompsons' entire apartment. A crystal chandelier hung from the high ceiling, casting colorful reflections on the marble floor. A wide staircase led to the second floor, the railing so polished it shone. "Ty, would you like a snack before dinner?" Martha asked, hanging her purse on a coat rack. Lila wanted to explore every corner of that incredible house, but she remembered she was supposed to act like Emily. "No, thank you. I'm going to my room." Martha nodded, unsurprised. "I'll call you when dinner is ready." Lila went up the stairs slowly, wondering which room was Emily's. In the second-floor hallway, she counted 6 doors. Which one was the right one? She stopped in front of the third one, hesitated, and then opened it. She got it right on the first try. It was a princess's room. Soft pink walls, a king-size bed with a canopy, a bookshelf full of books, a huge television on the wall. At the other end of the room, a door led to a private bathroom. The closet was the size of the Thompsons' kitchen. Lila could hardly believe it. She closed the door behind her and then did what she most wanted to do. She jumped on the bed. The mattress was so soft she sank into it, laughing. She rolled from side to side, feeling the soft sheets against her skin. Then she explored every drawer, every shelf. She found toys still in their boxes, sealed board games, books that looked like they had never been opened. In a dresser, she discovered a tablet and a laptop, both state-of-the-art. In the closet, the clothes still had tags on them, shoes of all kinds. Lila tried on a pair of soft leather boots, then a straw hat, then a coat that felt like it was made of clouds. "It's like a store," she whispered to herself. She went back to the room and turned on the television. She flipped through the channels until she found cartoons. She sat on the bed, surrounded by soft pillows, and for a moment felt like a princess in an enchanted castle. The Thompsons' apartment was on the 4th floor of a building with no elevator. Emily climbed the worn steps behind Mark and Sarah, trying to hide her surprise at the narrow staircase and dark hallway. "Home sweet home," Mark announced, unlocking the door. Emily followed them inside, blinking to adjust her eyes to the dimness. The entire apartment could fit in her dining room at home. The kitchen was just a corner, separated by a counter. A half-open door revealed the only bedroom. There was no hallway. There was no space for one. "Lila, honey, can you set the table while I start dinner?" Sarah asked, opening the small refrigerator. Emily froze. She didn't know where the plates were. She didn't know what to do. Mark noticed her hesitation and smiled. "I think our princess is tired from the outing. I'll set the table today." Sarah ruffled Emily's hair as she passed. "Go take a nap, sweetie. I'll call you when it's ready." Emily nodded, grateful for the escape. She looked around, wondering where Lila slept. There was no other room. "Your little spot is ready, as always," Mark said, pointing to the living room sofa. Emily approached. There was a folded blanket and a pillow on the sofa. A plastic box next to it held what appeared to be Lila's belongings. She sat on the sofa, feeling the difference from her bed at home. It was firm, a bit uncomfortable. However, the blanket, though worn, was clean and smelled of fabric softener. She opened Lila's box, feeling a bit like an intruder. Inside, she found a few toys, 2 well-used books, a notebook with drawings, and a rag doll with a mended arm. She picked up the doll carefully. It looked like it had been very loved. At 7 o'clock, Martha called Lila for dinner. The dining room had a table for 12. Lila sat at one end, and a plate was placed before her. Salad, filet mignon, mashed potatoes, all perfectly arranged. "Your father called again. He won't make it in time." Martha poured juice into a crystal glass. He said not to wait up. Lila felt a pang of disappointment, even though it wasn't her own father. How did Emily put up with this every day? "Where will you be eating?" she asked, looking at the empty space in front of her. "In the kitchen, as always, miss." Martha left, leaving Lila alone at the huge table. The only sound was the ticking of an old clock, so different from the noisy Thompson kitchen where everyone talked at once. She ate slowly, trying to enjoy the delicious food, but the silence began to bother her. She even started talking to her own reflection in the polished tabletop just to hear a human voice. When she finished, Martha cleared the plate and offered dessert. Lila chose ice cream, and once again was left alone. The initial excitement was beginning to give way to a strange feeling. Everything there was perfect, but something important was missing. "Lila." "Dinner's ready," Sarah called from the kitchen. Emily went to the small table where only 3 places were set so close that their elbows touched. Mark was already seated, and Sarah brought a steaming pot. "Spaghetti with tomato sauce tonight. It's not much, but..." Sarah served a generous portion onto Emily's plate. "It's the best spaghetti in the world," Mark completed with a smile. "Your mum's a heck of a cook." Sarah blushed. "Stop it, it's just spaghetti." Emily looked at her plate. At home, she had elaborate dishes made by a chef, but nothing was ever served with so much love. She tried a bite. "It's very good," she said softly. "Ça, just very good." Mark feigned indignation. "It's extraordinary. Chefs from all over the world beg for your mother's secret recipe." Sarah laughed. "The secret recipe is a can of store-bought sauce and a lot of love." Emily felt a warmth in her chest. The 3 of them ate together, talking the whole time. Mark told silly jokes that made Sarah roll her eyes, but always smile afterward. They talked about their day, about the new job, about plans for the future, and most surprisingly, they asked for Emily's opinion, listened to what she said, and responded. "And you, Lila? What did you think of the park today?" Sarah asked. Emily thought for a moment. "It was the best day I've ever had. She wasn't lying. After dinner, Lila explored the rest of the house. There was a music room with a grand piano, a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, even a private movie theater. She turned on the sound system in the main living room and danced alone, twirling through the empty rooms, trying out every sofa and armchair. There was so much space and so many beautiful things, but no one to share them with. At 9, Martha appeared. Bath time, Miss Emily. The bathroom was a dream, with a tub big enough to swim in. Martha prepared the bath, adding fragrant salts to the water. "Do you need help?" she asked. "No, thank you," Lila replied quickly. She wanted to be alone and enjoy the tub that felt like a swimming pool. When Martha left, Lila sank into the warm water, playing with the bubbles. At home, she took quick showers to save water. This was true luxury. But after 20 minutes, the charm began to fade. The water was getting cold, and the silence of the house seemed to seep through the walls. Lila felt something she had never felt before: loneliness, true loneliness. In the small Thompson living room, Emily helped clear the table. The kitchen didn't have a dishwasher, so Sarah washed while Mark dried. They gave Emily a sponge to wipe the table. "It's your turn to choose the game tonight," Mark said, putting away the last plate. Emily didn't know what he was talking about. "What game?" "Friday, game night, remember?" Mark pointed to a stack of worn boxes on a shelf. "But if you're too tired, we can just watch TV." "No, a game sounds nice." They chose a board game. The rules were simple, but the fun was in the interactions. Mark cheated on purpose just to make Sarah feign outrage. They both let Emily win a few rounds, but not all of them. There was genuine competition. When the game was over, Sarah made hot chocolate for everyone. They sat on the sofa, squeezed together, watching a comedy show on the small TV. Emily found herself laughing for real without forcing it. "I like your hair today," Sarah commented, running her fingers through Emily's strands. "It looks different, pretty." Emily tensed, afraid of being discovered, but Sarah just smiled and continued to stroke her hair, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Lila put on the silk pajamas she found in Emily's closet. She explored the room once more, opening every drawer, touching every object. She found a diary hidden under the mattress and flipped through it, feeling a little guilty. The pages were filled with sad drawings, lonely figures, windows with distant silhouettes, lots of stars. Few words, all of them about loneliness and waiting. She closed the diary and put it back in its hiding place. She understood more about Emily in that moment than in their entire conversation at the park. At 10, Martha came to check if everything was okay. "Your father called. He apologized for not being able to make it. He said he'll make it up to you tomorrow." Lila nodded, trying to look used to it. "It's okay. Good night, Miss Emily." Martha adjusted the room's thermostat and left, closing the door. Lila was alone in the huge room. She lay down on the king-size bed, sinking into the soft pillows. It was comfortable, luxurious, perfect, and completely lonely. She turned on the bedside lamp and looked around. So many toys, so many beautiful things, but no sign of life. No toy out of place, no open book, no clothes thrown about. It was like a showroom, not a place where someone actually lived. She turned off the light. On the ceiling, fluorescent stars glowed faintly. Lila counted them, trying not to think about the small apartment where her parents were probably telling Emily stories before bed. The silence of the house was deafening. "Time for bed, young lady," Sarah announced, turning off the TV. Mark turned the sofa into a bed with quick, practiced movements. Sarah brought a worn but clean set of pajamas from a drawer. "I'll give you some privacy to change," she said, heading to the bedroom with Mark. Emily put on the pajamas, feeling the different texture of the fabric. It wasn't as soft as hers, but it was warm and comfortable. She sat on the makeshift bed, observing the small apartment. Even with the lights out, she could hear Sarah and Mark talking softly in their room, the sound of the neighbor's TV, the distant noise of cars on the street. Sarah returned, carrying a hairbrush. "May I?" Emily nodded, surprised. Sarah sat beside her and began to brush her hair with gentle strokes. No one had done that since her mother died. Martha just checked if her hair was tidy. She never brushed it for her. "You're quiet tonight," Sarah commented. "Did something happen at the park?" Emily shook her head. "I'm just happy." Sarah smiled and kissed her forehead. "We are too. Good night, my love." "Sleep well, princess," Mark said from the bedroom door. "Tomorrow is another day." Emily lay down and Sarah tucked her in. Before leaving, she left one last kiss on her cheek. "If you need anything, we're right there." When she was alone, Emily stared at the peeling ceiling. She could hear the couple getting ready for bed, the creak of the old bed, their affectionate whispers. The apartment was small, noisy, simple, and completely full of love. For the first time in years, Emily fell asleep smiling. Sunday dawned with a light drizzle. Sarah Thompson was making breakfast, watching the rain through the small kitchen window. Mark was still asleep. Sunday was his only day to fully rest. In the living room, Emily remained on the sofa bed, pretending to be asleep. She had been awake for a while, but wanted to prolong the feeling of being there, wrapped in that worn blanket that smelled of cheap fabric softener and love. Sarah approached quietly and sat on the edge of the sofa. "Lila, are you awake, sweetie?" Emily slowly opened her eyes. "Good morning." "Good morning." "I made pancakes." Sarah brushed a strand of hair from Emily's face. She frowned for a moment, as if noticing something different, but then smiled. "Did you sleep well?" Emily nodded. She had slept better than she had in months. At the small kitchen table, Emily ate the pancakes slowly, cutting small pieces with her fork and knife. Sarah watched her with curiosity. "Since when do you eat so politely?" Emily froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. "Like what?" "You usually roll up the whole pancake and eat it with your hand," Sarah laughed. "And you always ask for more syrup." "Oh," Emily thought quickly, "I just feel like eating differently today." Sarah tilted her head, studying her daughter. "You've been different since yesterday. Quieter, more what?" "I don't know, different." Sarah reached out and touched Emily's forehead. "You don't have a fever. Maybe you're just tired." Emily forced a smile, trying to seem more Lila. "I'm great, just thinking." Sarah nodded, but her eyes remained watchful, observant. "If you say so." In the Parker mansion, Lila woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. She looked at the digital clock on the bedside table. 9:17 a.m. At home, she would have been up for hours, helping with breakfast or tidying up the sofa bed. Martha knocked on the door. "Miss Emily, are you awake?" "Yes," Lila replied, sitting up in the enormous bed. The nanny entered, carrying a tray. "Your breakfast?" "Your father left early. He had an urgent meeting." Lila felt a pang of disappointment, even though it wasn't her own father. It was Sunday. What kind of meeting happens on a Sunday? "Thank you," she said, accepting the tray. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, all perfectly arranged. "Any plans for today?" Martha asked, opening the curtains. Outside, the drizzle fell on the impeccable garden. Lila shrugged. "I don't know. What do I usually do on Sundays?" Martha seemed surprised by the question. "Well, your piano and swimming lessons are during the week. Sometimes you read or watch television. And my father." "What do we do together on Sundays?" Martha's expression softened. "He usually works, miss, but he always promises to make it up." "And does he?" Martha straightened the covers, avoiding Lila's gaze. "I'll let you have your breakfast. Call if you need anything." When the door closed, Lila looked at the tray. The food looked perfect, like something out of a TV commercial. She ate slowly, alone in the huge room, hearing only the distant sound of rain against the windows. In the Thompson kitchen, Mark appeared, yawning. "Good morning, my princesses," Sarah smiled, pouring him a cup of cheap coffee. "Sleepyhead." Emily watched the interaction. There was so much affection in that simple gesture. Good morning, Lila. Mark ruffled Emily's hair as he passed. Any plans for today? Before Emily could answer, Sarah intervened. I think she's a little tired. She's been quiet. Mark looked at Emily with concern. Are you feeling sick, Princess? No, Emily replied quickly. I'm fine. She's also eating differently, Sarah commented. They're all polite with a fork and knife, Mark laughed. Is our little wild child becoming a lady? Emily blushed. She was giving herself away without realizing it. I'm just trying something new, she murmured. Mark exchanged a look with Sarah, but didn't press the issue. How about a game after breakfast? Hey, it's raining anyway, we can't go out. Emily smiled, genuinely excited. I'd like that. Lila spent the morning exploring the mansion. The rain kept her indoors, which only intensified the feeling of confinement. Each room was larger and more luxurious than the last, but they all shared the same characteristic. They seemed untouched, like sets for a play where no one actually lived. In the library, she found a photo in a silver frame. A smiling woman held a baby in her arms, while a younger man, whom she recognized as Robert Parker, looked at them both with adoration. Emily's mother, she presumed. She wondered what had happened to her. Martha appeared at the door. Oh, lunch is ready, miss. Is my father coming home for lunch? Lila asked, putting the photo back in its place. He called and said he'll try, but no promises. In the enormous dining hall, Lila sat alone at the table again. A plate of grilled salmon with asparagus was served. Expensive restaurant food, with no one to share it with. She was halfway through her meal when the front door opened. Robert Parker entered, talking on his cell phone. He gave a quick wave to Lila before heading to his office, still engrossed in his conversation. Lila sighed. Couldn't he even turn off his phone for 5 minutes on a Sunday? In the small Thompson living room, Emily was playing Uno with Mark and Sarah. The rain pattered against the windows, creating a cozy atmosphere. The game was simple, but the laughter was constant. Hey, that's not fair, Mark protested when Sarah played a plush 4 on his cards. Yes, it is. It's in the rules, Sarah laughed, winking at Emily. Isn't it, Lila? Emily nodded, smiling. Rules are rules. Mark picked up the 4 extra cards, grumbling playfully. You two always gang up on me. Emily felt a warmth in her chest. Was this what a family was supposed to be like? People who laughed together, who made jokes, who paid attention to each other. It's your turn, Lila, Sarah reminded her. Emily played her card distractedly. She was more interested in the dynamic between them than in the game itself. Everything okay, sweetie? Sarah asked, noticing her distraction. Yes, Emily replied, and then, without thinking, added, I just wish every day was like this. Sarah and Mark exchanged glances. What do you mean? Mark asked softly. We always play on Sundays. Emily realized her mistake. I know, it's nice. That's all. Sarah studied Emily's face for a moment, as if looking for something familiar that was different. You're so thoughtful since yesterday. Did something happen at the park that you didn't tell us about? Emily lowered her eyes to her cards. No, nothing. But Sarah didn't seem convinced. In the afternoon, Robert finally came out of his office. He found Lila in the living room, watching television without really paying attention. Hi, Emily. Sorry for the delay. This meeting was important. Lila looked at him, trying to hide her irritation. How did Emily put up with this? It's okay. Robert sat on the sofa, maintaining a polite distance. How was your day? Quiet, Lila replied, a bit too bluntly for Emily's standards. Robert seemed surprised by the response. Well, it's Sunday. Quiet days are good. Quiet is different from empty, Lila muttered. What was that? Nothing. Lila turned her gaze back to the television. Robert grew restless. Normally, his daughter didn't demand much from him. It was one of the things that made his busy life manageable. Do you want to do something? We could, I don't know. Watch a movie. Lila thought about what Sundays were like at home. Her father, her real father, would be telling silly stories, helping her with some craft project, or just sitting beside her, truly present. A movie would be nice, she finally replied. Robert smiled, looking relieved. Great. You pick. For a brief moment, Lila felt a connection. Maybe there was hope for Robert and Emily, but then his phone rang. Robert looked at the screen and his face changed. I have to take this. It's important. Pick the movie. I'll be right back. And he left the room, already talking on the phone. Lila was alone again. In the evening, Sarah prepared a simple soup for dinner. Emily helped set the table, trying to remember where Lila would keep everything. Since when do you know where the spoons are? Sarah asked, watching her closely. Emily froze. I've always known. You usually grab the forks when I ask for spoons. Sarah smiled, but her eyes were serious. And since yesterday you've been folding the blanket perfectly. And you eat slowly. And you say please and excuse me all the time. Emily swallowed hard. I'm just trying to be more polite. Sarah didn't push, but Emily could feel that she suspected something. During dinner, the conversation flowed naturally. Mark talked about the new job he would start the next day. Sarah talked about a sewing order she needed to finish. Emily listened with genuine interest, asking questions, getting involved. You know you can tell us anything, right? Sarah said suddenly, looking directly at Emily. Of course, Emily replied, her heart racing. Anything, Sarah repeated. Even if it seems strange. Emily nodded, not trusting her own voice. Did Sarah know? How could she know? After dinner, while Mark washed the dishes, Sarah took Emily to the living room. They sat on the sofa that would soon become Lila's bed. Sweetheart, Sarah began, holding Emily's hands, I know my daughter. I know every expression, every gesture, every habit. She paused. And you, for the past 2 days, have been different. Emily felt her blood run cold. Different how? I can't explain it. It's like... Sarah studied her face. It's like you're Lila, but not completely. Emily looked down. Was the game up? Whatever it is, and Sarah continued, I want you to know that we're here. To talk. To help. Understand. Emily nodded, fighting back tears. What would it be like to have a mother like this every day? Someone who noticed every little change, who cared so much. Can I stay here? She asked in a whisper. Sarah frowned. What do you mean, sweetie? This is your home. Emily didn't answer. She couldn't explain that she wanted to stay forever, that she didn't want to go back to her empty mansion, her absent father, her lonely life. That this little family, in this small apartment, was everything she had ever wanted. In the Parker mansion, Lila was sitting alone in the living room. Robert had gone back to his office after dinner, promising it would be just another half hour. That was 2 hours ago. The house was too quiet, too big, too empty. Lila thought of her parents, of their small, noisy apartment, of Emily sleeping in her makeshift bed, receiving the affection she deserved. The tears came without warning. First one, then another, until she was sobbing, curled up on the huge sofa. She missed home. She missed her parents. She wanted to go back. That's how Robert found her when he finally came out of his office. He stopped at the door, completely unprepared for the sight of his always composed daughter crying openly. Emily, what happened? Lila lifted her tear-stained face. For a moment, she forgot about the charade. Forgot she was supposed to be Emily. She was just a 10-year-old girl who wanted to go home. This house is beautiful, she said between sobs. But nobody talks to me. I just want to go home. Robert stood paralyzed, as if he had been slapped. Emily, this is your home. Lila shook her head, still crying. No, it's not. Home is where people talk to you, where someone asks how your day was and really wants to know, where you're not alone. Robert approached hesitantly, sitting beside her. He reached out his hand but stopped halfway, as if he didn't know how to comfort his own daughter. I'm sorry, I've been busy, but you're always busy, Lila interrupted. There's always something more important. Robert swallowed hard. The words hit him like arrows. It was true. There was always something more urgent than his daughter. But to hear it from her, to see the pain in her eyes. Emily. Lila wiped her tears with the back of her hands. Tomorrow. I need to go to the park tomorrow. The park? Robert frowned, confused by the change of subject. Why? I just need to... Please. Something in her tone, desperate, urgent, made Robert nod. All right, I'll take you tomorrow. Lila sniffled, trying to compose herself. Promise? I promise. But even as he said it, his phone vibrated in his pocket. Instinctively, Robert took it out to check. Lila watched the movement with resignation. Some things never changed. The next morning, Emily woke with a heavy heart. It was time to go back, to leave this little paradise and return to her life of empty luxury. Sarah had prepared her favorite breakfast, or rather Lila's favorite, and tried to keep the conversation lively, but there was a tension in the air. Lila, Sarah said as they tidied the kitchen, is there anything you want to tell me? Anything at all? Emily almost confessed everything right then. Almost said that she wasn't Lila, that she was a rich, lonely girl who had found more love in this small apartment in 2 days than in years in her mansion. But the words got stuck in her throat. I need to go to the park today, she finally said. Sarah seemed surprised. To the park? The same one from Saturday? Emily nodded. It's important. Mark, who was listening to the conversation, exchanged a look with Sarah. We can take you after lunch. I have a job interview in the morning. Thank you, Emily said, feeling both relieved and sad. Today she would see Lila again. Today she would go home. But a part of her didn't want to go back. A part of her wanted to stay as Lila Thompson forever. At the park, the fountain where they had first met was surrounded by pigeons. Lila arrived first, accompanied by Robert, who checked his watch every few minutes. How long are we staying? He asked. Not long, Lila replied, scanning the paths for the Thompsons. When she finally saw them coming up the stone path, her heart leaped. Emily was walking between Mark and Sarah, holding both their hands. It looked so natural, as if she had always been part of that family. The girls looked at each other from a distance, a silent recognition passing between them. It was time to tell the truth. The social worker's office was too small to comfortably fit the 6 people sitting around the table. Robert Parker looked out of place, his expensive suit contrasting with the peeling walls. Sarah and Mark Thompson held each other's hands, still processing everything they had discovered in the last few days. Emily and Lila sat side by side, identical in every physical detail, but dressed completely differently. Emily in a simple dress borrowed from Lila, and Lila in clothes far too expensive for a child. Thank you for coming on such short notice, said Mrs. Winters, adjusting her glasses as she flipped through an old folder. I must confess, this situation is a first for me. Robert cleared his throat. Can we get straight to the point? I have a company to run. Sarah shot a disapproving look at the businessman, while Mark squeezed her hand to restrain her. The girls exchanged a knowing glance. In just 2 days, they had become well acquainted with the dynamics of both families. Mrs. Winters nodded. Of course, as I explained over the phone, I found the records of the girls' adoptions, and, well, they are, in fact, twin sisters. A heavy silence filled the room. Although everyone had suspected it since the incident at the park, hearing the official confirmation made it all much more real. How could this have happened? Sarah asked, and her voice trembling. How could 2 sisters be separated like this? The social worker sighed, looking genuinely troubled. It was an administrative error, a terrible mistake. She opened 2 folders side by side. You see, both were left at the orphanage when they were just a few days old. The biological mother couldn't afford to raise twins, and no one thought it was important to mention there were 2 of them, Robert questioned, indignant. According to the records, the information existed, but Mrs. Winters hesitated. There was a staff change around that time. The orphanage was overwhelmed. The babies were placed in separate cribs, in different wings, and they simply fell into separate adoption processes. Lila reached out and took Emily's hand. Both stared intently at the open folders that contained their life stories. When Mr. Parker came to adopt, he specified he wanted a girl, preferably a newborn, the social worker continued. And 3 weeks later, when the Thompsons came, we didn't specify, Mark completed. We just wanted a child to love. Mrs. Winters nodded. Exactly, and no one connected the dots. In different adoptions, with different social workers, the twins became Emily Parker and Lila Thompson. Robert ran a hand over his face, looking suddenly exhausted. And the biological mother, does she know about this? Unfortunately, we haven't had contact with her for years. She signed the papers relinquishing custody and never came back. She only left a letter to be given to her daughters when they turn 18. The girls sat up straighter in their chairs. Can we see the letter now? Emily asked. The social worker shook her head. Girl, I'm sorry. Legally, I can only give it to you when you come of age, or if the biological mother appears and authorizes it. Lila grimaced in disappointment. That's not fair. It's about us. I know, dear, Mrs. Winters replied kindly. But those are the rules. Sarah leaned forward. So what now? What happens to them? The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Robert shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Legally, the social worker explained, both adoptions are valid. You are the legal parents of the respective children you adopted. But they're sisters, Sarah protested. Twins. You can't just separate two sisters. Technically, they have been separated for 10 years, and Mrs. Winters replied, the situation is complicated, but there's no legal basis to reverse the adoptions or... We're not even asking for that, Mark interrupted, his voice calm but firm. We just want to know what's best for the girls. All the adults looked at Emily and Lila, who remained seated side by side, holding hands, identical in appearance but so different in life experiences. What do you girls want? The social worker asked. Emily and Lila exchanged glances. Saying just 2 days together, they had already developed that silent communication that only twins seem to possess. We want to stay together, Lila answered, but we also want our families, Emily added. Robert frowned. That's not possible. You can't live in 2 places at the same time. Sarah shot a challenging look at the businessman. Maybe not, but we can find a solution. They just found each other after 10 years. They can't be separated again. A heavy silence fell over the room. Mrs. Winters closed the folders and adjusted her glasses. If I may make a suggestion, she said carefully, there are several possible arrangements, regular visits, alternating weekends, shared holidays. The important thing is that the girls maintain contact. Robert looked at Emily, his daughter, the girl he had raised alone since his wife's death. He noticed how comfortably she fit beside her sister, how she seemed more alive, more present than he had ever seen her at home. We need to think about their well-being, he finally said. I agree, Mark replied. And their well-being includes maintaining the bond they just discovered. The girls watched the conversation like a tennis match, looking from one adult to another. We can try a test run, Sarah suggested. Maybe Sunday lunches together, to start? Robert seemed about to refuse, but then his gaze met Lila's, the girl who, for 2 days, he thought was his daughter. The girl who had cried on his living room sofa, saying no one talked to her. Something inside him contracted painfully. I think we can try that, he said, surprising everyone, including himself. Emily's face lit up. Really? Robert nodded, trying to smile. Really? Mrs. Winters looked relieved. Excellent. I can help formalize a visitation agreement if you'd like. That won't be necessary, Robert said, extending his hand to Mark. We can handle this like adults, for the girls' sake. Mark hesitated for a second, then took the handshake. For the girl's sake. Leaving the social worker's office, the two families walked together to the parking lot. Robert stopped by his imported car, while the Thompsons headed for the bus stop. "Do you need a ride?" he offered, looking almost embarrassed by his own wealth. Sarah opened her mouth to refuse, but Mark answered first. "That would be helpful, thank you." In the car, the girls sat in the back seat, whispering to each other. The adults maintained a tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts. "When can we see each other again?" Lila asked, when Robert parked in front of the Thompsons' building. "How about Sunday?" Sarah suggested, looking at Robert. "You could come have lunch with us." Robert frowned. "Here? Unless you'd rather host us at your house," Sarah replied with a slight edge to her voice. "Sunday is great," Mark intervened, giving his wife a warning look. "Noon," Robert nodded. "We'll be here." The girls hugged for a long time, reluctant to part. "Just a few more days," Emily whispered to her sister. "I'll send letters," Lila promised. Every day, Sarah smoothed a strand of Emily's hair. "Ready to go home, sweetie?" Emily looked at Lila one last time, then nodded. "Ready." As Robert's car drove away, taking Emily and Lila in opposite directions once more, both looked back through the windows, silently promising they would never be truly separated again. No matter what happened, they had found each other, and it was no accident. The first night back at the mansion was strange for Emily. Her room, once a refuge, now seemed too big, too empty. Lying in her king-size bed, she looked at the fluorescent stars on the ceiling and thought of the Thompsons' sofa bed, the smell of cheap fabric softener, the comforting sound of people talking in the next room. Martha knocked on the door and entered without waiting for a response, as she always did. "Is everything all right, Miss Emily? Do you need anything before you sleep?" Emily shook her head. "No, thank you." The nanny nodded and turned to leave, following the daily routine. Before she could close the door, Emily called out, "Martha." "Yes, miss." Emily hesitated. She wanted to ask if Martha could stay a little longer, talk, maybe brush her hair like Sarah had done. But the words wouldn't come out. Nothing. "Good night. Good night, Miss Emily." The door closed, and Emily was alone again. In the silence of the room, she felt the absence of laughter, of conversation, of the small gestures of affection that filled the Thompson apartment. There, someone always asked what she was thinking, always cared about her answers. Here, everything was perfect and empty. In the small Thompson apartment, Lila tidied her spot on the sofa bed. Sarah had washed the blanket and pillow, and the smell of fabric softener filled the room. "Everything okay over there, Princess?" Mark asked, coming out of the bedroom already in his pajamas. "Everything's fine," Lila replied, but her voice faltered a bit. Mark sat beside her on the sofa. "Do you want to talk about what happened? About your sister?" Lila felt her eyes sting. "It's strange. I spent 10 years not knowing she existed, and now I can't stop thinking about her." "It's normal. You're twins." Mark put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. You have a special connection." "Her house is so different," Lila continued. "Everything is big and beautiful, but quiet." "Did you miss it here?" Lila nodded. "I missed you guys. The noise, Dad's bad jokes." She smiled a little. "Even the neighbor with the loud TV." Mark laughed and kissed the top of his daughter's head. "And we missed you, even without knowing it wasn't you." Sarah appeared at the bedroom door. "Are you two going to talk all night? School is tomorrow." "School?" Lila's eyes widened. "But I haven't been to school in months." Her parents exchanged a look. "Emily told you that, didn't she?" Lila bit her lip, realizing her mistake. "Yes, she mentioned it." Sarah sat on the other side of her daughter. "Well, that's going to change. Your dad's new job starts tomorrow, remember? And we managed to arrange for you to go back to school too." "Really?" Lila couldn't contain her excitement. "I get to go back." "Yes, young lady. Next Monday you'll be back. We've already spoken with the principal, explained the situation." Sarah hesitated. "Well, part of the situation." "This is amazing." Lila hugged them both at the same time. Then, more quietly, "Do you think Emily can go to the same school?" "That's something we need to discuss with Mr. Parker," Mark replied carefully. "But I'm sure you two will see each other a lot." When she finally lay down to sleep, Lila felt at home, safe. But there was an empty space now, an Emily-shaped space. How was it possible to miss someone so much whom she had just met? The next morning, Emily woke up to the same silence as always. She went down for breakfast and found the table set just for her, like every other day. Martha supervised the maid who was serving breakfast. "Good morning, Miss Emily. Did you sleep well?" "Yes, thank you." But she hadn't. She had spent half the night thinking about what Sarah and Mark were doing. If they had noticed the differences between her and Lila. If they were talking about what had happened. "Your father has already left. He had an early meeting." Emily nodded, unsurprised. She ate slowly, feeling the weight of the silence on her shoulders as she never had before. Before meeting Lila, before experiencing the Thompsons' life, silence was just silence. Now it was a painful absence. In the first letter she sent, Lila drew the Thompson family in front of their building. She added a thought bubble above her head, with a drawing of Emily inside. On the back of the paper she wrote in her round handwriting, "Dear Emily, I miss you." It's weird, isn't it? We just met, but it feels like a piece of me has always been missing. A piece shaped like you. Mom said I can go back to school on Monday. Dad started his new job today. He was nervous, but he pretended he wasn't. Mom always knows when he's nervous because he combs his hair the wrong way. How is it in the mansion? Has your dad noticed anything? Did Martha ask about the switch? Write back soon or call. The phone here got reconnected yesterday. With love, Lila, your twin sister. Lila adorned the letter with stars and hearts, then put it in an envelope that Sarah helped her address. The next day, coming back from the market with her mother, she found an envelope waiting in the mailbox. "Dear Lila, I miss you too. It's like half of me stayed with you. The house is the same. Quiet, big. My dad is still working a lot. Martha asked if I was okay. Said I seem different. I think she knows something happened, but not exactly what. I'm so happy you're going back to school. Do you think we could ever study together? I have private lessons here at home, but I'd rather go to a real school. Today I tried to make pancakes like your mum. Martha almost had a heart attack when she saw me in the kitchen. She said, 'It's no place for you, miss.' The pancakes were awful, but it was fun to try. Would you mind if I called tonight? I'd love to hear your voice. With love, Emily. I still can't believe I have a sister." Emily's drawings were more detailed, more technical, the result of years of private art lessons, but the feelings expressed were just as sincere. The letters continued over the following days. Sometimes two would arrive on the same day. Sometimes they were just drawings. Through them, the girls began to fill in the 10 years of separation, sharing memories, preferences, fears, and dreams. Emily kept each of Lila's letters in a decorated box she had found in the library. Lila pinned Emily's letters to the wall next to her sofa bed, creating a colorful mosaic that grew with each passing day. Phone calls became a routine. Every night at 8 o'clock sharp, the Thompsons' phone would ring. Sarah or Mark would answer, exchange a few polite words, then pass the phone to Lila, who would run to answer. Emily, in her silent house, would sit on the floor of the entrance hall, her back against the wall they see, and speak in a low voice so as not to disturb her father, in case he was home. He usually wasn't. On Friday, 4 days after discovering they were sisters, Robert Parker came home earlier than usual. He was tired. Negotiations for the acquisition of a rival company were more complicated than he had anticipated. "Miss Emily is in her room," Martha informed him when he asked for his daughter. Robert nodded and went up the stairs. He stopped in front of Emily's bedroom door, hesitant. He didn't usually interrupt his daughter's routine. In fact, he wasn't sure what her routine was. Martha took care of everything. He knocked softly. "Come in." came the surprised reply. Emily was sitting at her desk, writing something that she quickly hid when her father entered. "Hi, Dad." "Hi, Emily." Robert looked around, noticing how tidy the room was. He couldn't remember the last time he had been in here. "Is everything okay?" "Yes." An uncomfortable silence settled between them. Robert realized, perhaps for the first time, how he didn't know how to talk to his own daughter. "Martha said dinner will be served in half an hour. I thought we could have dinner together tonight." Emily stared at him, clearly surprised. "Really?" "Of course," Robert forced a smile. "We're a family, aren't we?" The word family hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Emily thought of the Thompsons, how they formed a real family despite their difficulties. She thought of Lila, her twin sister, the other half of herself she had lived 10 years without knowing. "Yes," she finally replied. "We're a family." Dinner was quiet at first. Robert tried a few generic questions about school, piano lessons, things he knew were part of Emily's life but had no idea how she really felt about them. Emily answered politely but without enthusiasm, until suddenly she put down her fork and looked directly into her father's eyes. "Dad, what was your childhood like?" Robert blinked, surprised by the question. "My childhood?" "Yes. Did you have siblings? Were your parents always around? Were you happy?" "Well," Robert cleared his throat, "uncomfortable. I had a normal childhood, I guess. My parents worked a lot, just like me. I have an older sister, as you know." "Aunt Catherine, who lives in Europe and never comes to visit?" "Yes, that's the one." Robert took a sip of water. "Why the sudden interest?" Emily poked at her food with her fork. "I'm just trying to understand some things." "What things?" "Family. What makes a family a real family?" Robert frowned. "Does this have to do with the Thompsons, with your sister?" Emily looked up, meeting her father's eyes. "At Lila's house, I was seen. Here, everything is beautiful, but no one sees me." The words hit Robert like a punch. He opened his mouth to reply, to deny, to defend himself, but he couldn't, because he knew it was true. "Emily, I'm not saying this to make you feel bad," Emily continued, her voice small but firm. "It's just that now I know the difference, and it hurts." Robert felt something break inside him. A wall carefully built over the years, a barrier he had erected after his wife's death, when he threw himself into work to avoid dealing with the pain. A barrier that, without realizing it, had also separated him from his daughter. "I'm so sorry," he finally said, and the words felt inadequate, insufficient. Emily just nodded, looking back down at her plate. They finished dinner in silence, but not the same silence as before. This was a silence full of unsaid words, painful revelations, truths that could no longer be ignored. When Emily got up to go to her room, Robert called after her. "Emily?" She turned around. "Thank you for telling me that, for being honest." He hesitated. I'll try to do better." A small smile touched Emily's lips. "Good night, Dad." "Good night, honey." When she left, Robert remained at the table, staring at the empty seat across from him. He remembered Lila, the girl identical to his daughter, yet somehow completely different. He remembered how she had cried on the sofa, saying no one talked to her. At the time, he thought it was Emily having some kind of breakdown. Now he understood. His daughter was suffocating in this perfect, empty house, and he hadn't even noticed. Robert stood up, determined. In his office, he took out his planner and began to rearrange appointments, cancel non-essential meetings, delegate tasks. For the first time in years, something was more important than the company. His daughter needed him, and he would not fail her again. Robert Parker adjusted his tie as he climbed the stairs of the building. He had never imagined he would feel so uncomfortable in a place, not because of the building's simplicity, but because every worn step reminded him of decisions he had made throughout his life, decisions that prioritized profits over people. He stopped on the 4th floor, out of breath. How did the Thompsons do this every day? He straightened his suit and took a deep breath before knocking on the door. It was Mark who answered. The two men faced each other for a moment, as different as they could be. Robert in his impeccable suit, perfectly cut hair. Mark in a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up, a hint of stubble. "Mr. Parker," Mark said, expressionless, "please come in." Robert stepped into the small apartment, trying not to show his surprise at the size of the place. The living room was smaller than his closet. A sofa bed took up half the space, with sheets folded on top of it. On the wall, a colorful mosaic of drawings and letters, the correspondence between the twins. "The girls are at the park with Sarah," Mark explained, offering Robert the only armchair. "So I thought we could talk better without them." Robert nodded, grateful for the privacy. He sat on the edge of the armchair, still uncomfortable. "Coffee?" Mark offered. "Please." Mark went to the small kitchen, separated from the living room only by a counter. He prepared 2 cups and returned, handing one to Robert before sitting on the sofa. "I must admit, I was surprised by your call," Mark said, blowing on his hot coffee. "I didn't expect you'd want to meet, especially here." "We needed to talk," Robert replied, "about the girls, about the future." Mark nodded, studying the man before him. "I agree." A heavy silence settled between them. Robert took a sip of the coffee, surprised by its strong, good taste. It wasn't the imported gourmet coffee he was used to, but it had something authentic. "Mr. Thompson, please, call me Mark." "Mark?" Robert placed his cup on the coffee table. "I want to help with Lila's education. I can pay for a private school, the same one Emily attends. We're not asking for charity," Mark interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "It's not charity. It's shared responsibility. They're sisters." Mark looked at the man before him for a long moment. Then he placed his cup next to Robert's and leaned forward. "Mr. Parker, I need to say something, and I ask that you hear me out." Robert nodded, tense. "I used to work for your company," Mark said, keeping his tone calm. "For 3 years, in the production department. I was dedicated. I worked overtime without complaint. I had the best performance reviews." Robert frowned, confused. He didn't remember a Mark Thompson. "Time when the production line was moved overseas, we were all laid off," Mark continued. "Without proper notice, without a clear reason, without time to prepare. That's standard practice in corporate restructuring," Robert defended automatically. "For you, maybe. For people like me, it's devastating." Mark held his gaze firm. "You don't look at the people below you, Mr. Parker. You never have. We're just numbers on a spreadsheet, expenses to be cut when it's convenient." Robert felt the words like a punch to the gut. He wanted to argue, to defend himself, to explain the realities of the business world. But something stopped him. Maybe the dignity with which Mark spoke. Maybe the fact that they were sitting in this tiny living room, where his daughter had found more affection in 2 days than in his mansion in years. "But now," Mark continued, his voice softening, "my daughter and yours have opened our eyes." Robert looked down at his hands, hands that signed contracts, fired people, built empires, hands that rarely touched his own daughter. "I'm not saying this to make you feel bad," Mark added. "I'm saying this because we are now connected, whether we like it or not. And if we're going to make this work, for the girls' sake, we need to be honest with each other." Robert looked up, meeting Mark's direct gaze. There was no anger there, just a quiet honesty that completely disarmed him. "You're right," Robert admitted, the words heavy on his tongue. "I never looked. I never saw." Mark nodded, not triumphantly, just accepting the truth of the confession. "I want to fix this," Robert continued, "not just with the girls, with you too." "I don't need charity," Mark repeated. "Dad, it's not charity," Robert insisted. "It's justice. You said you worked in the production department. What was your specialty?" Mark hesitated, surprised by the question. Quality supervision. I had a technical degree in production engineering. Robert nodded thoughtfully. We're expanding the quality control department at the local factory. We need someone with practical experience. Mark narrowed his eyes. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering an opportunity for both of us, Robert replied. For you, a fair job, with a salary that matches your qualifications. For me, a chance to start seeing the people behind the numbers. A heavy silence filled the room. Mark stared at Robert, searching for signs of condescension or guilt. He found only sincere determination. Why should I trust you? He finally asked. Robert didn't answer immediately. The question deserved consideration. Because, for the first time in my life, something is more important than the company, he said at last. My daughter, her connection with Lila, the chance to build something better than what we have now. Mark continued to study him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. Let's give it a try. 2 weeks later, the families gathered for a picnic in the park where the girls had first met. The weather was perfect. Blue sky, a light breeze, the sun shining on the lake. Sarah was spreading a checkered blanket on the grass while Mark helped Robert unload the picnic basket from the car. A huge basket the businessman had ordered from a fancy restaurant, much to the chagrin of Sarah, who had insisted she could prepare everything herself. The girls were running across the lawn, identical in appearance but now distinctly dressed. Emily wore a simpler dress than usual, her hair in a relaxed ponytail. Lila maintained her own style, but her clothes were new, a gift from Robert that Sarah had reluctantly accepted. They look happy, Robert commented, watching the twins. Mark nodded. They are. The connection between them is incredible to see. How's the new job going? Robert asked, carrying the heavy basket. Surprisingly well, Mark admitted. The team is competent, the challenges are interesting, and the salary... He shook his head, still not entirely comfortable with the subject. It makes a difference. Robert smiled, pleased. Mark had started at the company a week ago as a quality control supervisor. It hadn't been an easy decision for him to accept. Pride had almost stopped him, but his family's needs and the sincerity of Robert's apology had convinced him. Lila starts at Emily's school tomorrow, Robert mentioned. All set. She could barely sleep from excitement, Mark replied. I've never seen her so enthusiastic about the idea of studying, Robert laughed. Emily's the same. She decorated the entire school layout to show Lila. I don't think I've ever seen her talk so much. They reached where Sarah was waiting and placed the basket on the blanket. The twins ran up to them, their faces flushed with excitement. Dad, can I show Lila how to rent the little boats? Emily asked, pulling on Robert's jacket sleeve. Of course you can. Do you want to go now? Yes, they answered in unison. Robert took his wallet out of his pocket, but Mark held up a hand. I'll get it this time. Robert hesitated, then nodded, respecting the gesture. Mark gave Lila a few bills. Be careful, and come back in half an hour to eat, Sarah advised. The girls ran off, hand in hand, laughing. Sarah watched them go, a soft smile on her lips. It's still strange, isn't it, to think that for 10 years they lived apart, without knowing the other existed. And now they can't be separated for 5 minutes, Mark added. Robert sat on the blanket, awkward in his casual suit, the most informal he could manage for a picnic. Thank you, he said suddenly, for letting me be a part of this, after everything. Sarah looked at him for a moment, still not entirely comfortable with the businessman, but then her gaze softened. The girls need both families, she said simply. We're doing this for them. Robert nodded, grateful for her sincerity. The next morning, a black car pulled up in front of the Thompsons' building. Robert got out, impeccable in his suit, and checked his watch. 15 minutes before the agreed time. Perfect. Mark and Lila were already waiting on the sidewalk. The girl was wearing the private school uniform for the first time, identical to Emily's, who was waiting in the car. Good morning, Robert greeted. Ready for the big day? Lila nodded, excited but also nervous. Emily said the school is huge. It is, but you'll be in the same class. She'll show you everything." Lila hugged her father before getting into the car, where Emily was eagerly waiting for her. The girls immediately started whispering and laughing, creating their own world. "I'll pick them up at 3, Robert informed. "I can bring Lila straight home if you prefer." "That would be great," Mark replied. "I start the afternoon shift today." Robert nodded. "And how is Sarah with the new apartment?" After offering Mark the job, Robert had also insisted on helping the family move to a better place, not out of charity, as he made a point to clarify, but because Mark's new salary allowed for it. After much resistance, the Thompsons agreed to move to a more spacious apartment, closer to the girls' school. "Still getting used to it," Mark admitted. "It's strange to have extra space after being cramped for so long." "Is Lila happy with her own room?" Mark smiled. "Happy is an understatement. She's decorated every inch with drawings, letters, pictures of the two of them." Robert nodded, satisfied. "I have to go, or the girls will be late on their first day." "Thank you for doing this," Mark said, extending his hand. "For taking them. For everything." Robert accepted the handshake, feeling the weight of the gratitude. "It's the least I can do." In the car, the twins talked non-stop about the day ahead. Robert watched them in the rearview mirror, amazed at Emily's transformation. She, who had always been so quiet and reserved, was now gesturing excitedly, explaining to her sister about the teachers and the classes, the extracurricular activities. "Dad," Emily called out suddenly, "are you really picking us up yourself?" The question caught him by surprise. "Of course I am. I promised, didn't I? It's just that usually Martha comes, or the driver. Today it'll be me," Robert stated firmly. "And tomorrow too, and the day after." Emily exchanged a look with Lila, and they both smiled. "And can we get ice cream after school?" Lila asked, testing the limits. Robert laughed. "Today, yes, to celebrate the first day." The girls cheered in the back seat, and Robert felt a wave of satisfaction. For years, he had delegated his daughter's upbringing to employees, convinced that providing for her materially was enough. What a huge mistake he had made. In the following weeks, a new routine was established. Robert drove the girls to school every morning, adjusting his meeting schedule to start later. In the afternoon, he alternated with Mark to pick them up. On the days he was responsible for both, he would take them for a snack to the library or simply home, where he would participate in their homework instead of locking himself in his office. The families gathered every Sunday, alternating between a picnic in the park, weather permitting, and dinners at the Thompsons' new apartment. Robert had offered his mansion for the gatherings, but Sarah still felt uncomfortable there, and he respected that. On a normal Tuesday, Robert arrived at the school promptly at 3 o'clock. The twins came out together, surrounded by other students curious about the identical sisters who had been reunited. The story of the twins separated at adoption had become a legend at the school. "How was your day?" he asked as they got into the car. "Lila got a perfect score in math," Emily announced, proud of her sister. "It was just luck," Lila protested, blushing. "No, it wasn't. You're very smart," Emily insisted. "The teacher said she's never seen anyone catch up so quickly after being out of school for so long." Robert smiled at Lila in the rearview mirror. "Congratulations. That calls for a celebration." "Ice cream," Emily suggested hopefully. "Better than that. How about dinner at that pizzeria you like? We can invite Mark and Sarah too." The girls exchanged excited glances and nodded. As he drove, Robert reflected on the changes of the past few weeks. The frantic work pace he had maintained for years had slowed down, and surprisingly, the company hadn't collapsed. In fact, some of the changes he had implemented, inspired by his conversations with Mark, were showing positive results. But the biggest change was at home. The once silent mansion now echoed with laughter when Lila came over for movie nights or weekends. Emily smiled more, talked more, demanded more of his presence, and he discovered he loved meeting those demands. He looked again at the twins in the rearview mirror, chattering excitedly about something that had happened at school. They were so alike and so different at the same time. Each carried the marks of the upbringing she had received, but together they seemed complete in a way they weren't individually. "Dad, are you listening?" Emily's voice brought him back to the present. "Sorry, I got distracted. What were you saying?" "I asked if you can help us with our science project. It's about genetics." Robert smiled. "Of course I can. We'll work on it together." Together, the word that had changed everything. The gentle Saturday rain tapped against the windows of the Thompson apartment. Not the first cramped apartment that barely fit 3 people, but a new home, spacious enough for a family and without being extravagant. In the kitchen, the aromas of garlic, onion and tomato mingled as Sarah stirred a large pot of spaghetti sauce. "A little more basil?" Robert asked, holding a small pot of herbs he had brought from his garden. Sarah smiled, still not entirely used to seeing the businessman with his sleeves rolled up, helping in the kitchen. "Yes, please. About 5 leaves should do." Robert carefully picked the leaves and handed them to Sarah, who chopped them finely before adding them to the sauce. On the kitchen island, Mark was preparing fresh pasta, his hands covered in flour as he worked the dough with surprising skill. "Where did you learn to make pasta like that?" Robert asked, watching the process. "My grandmother was Italian," Mark replied without looking up from his work. "She used to say a man who can't cook is only half a man." Robert laughed. "I guess I'm a quarter of a man then. I only know how to make eggs and toast." "It's never too late to learn," Sarah said, handing Robert a cutting board and vegetables for the salad. "Start by chopping these into small cubes." From the hallway leading to the bedrooms, children's laughter echoed. The twins were in Lila's room, the half-open door revealing flashes of movement as they passed by the opening. "They're so happy," Mark commented, looking at the bedroom door. "It's as if they've always been a part of each other's lives." Robert nodded, chopping a cucumber with excessive concentration. "Emily has changed so much. In a good way. She used to be so reserved." "And Lila is blossoming at school," Sarah added. "The teacher said she's never seen a student catch up on lost time so quickly." For a moment, they worked in comfortable silence, only the sound of the rain, the knives on the cutting board, and the dough being worked filling the air. "Thank you," Robert said suddenly, his voice low. Mark and Sarah looked at him, surprised. "For what?" Sarah asked. "For sharing your daughter, your family." Robert continued to chop the vegetables, avoiding looking directly at them. "You could have reacted completely differently when you found out about the girls. You could have kept me away, you could have—" "Your family," Mark interrupted simply. "There's nothing to thank us for." Robert finally looked up, a genuine smile on his face. "I'm still learning what that really means." In Lila's room, the twins were lying on the rug, surrounded by magazines, colored pencils, and scattered papers. They were working on a project for their art class, a mural about family, a theme they had chosen with obvious enthusiasm. "I think we should put the park in the center," Emily suggested, drawing a quick sketch. "That's where we met." Lila nodded, coloring a small version of what looked like the 5 of them, the twins, Robert, Mark, and Sarah, at a picnic. "Do you think she's watching us from somewhere?" Lila asked suddenly. Emily didn't have to ask who her sister was referring to. "Our biological mother. I don't know, maybe. I wish we could read that letter she left." "One day we will," Emily said, taking her sister's hand. "When we turn 18. They were silent for a moment, each lost in thought about the woman they had never met, but who had given them life and each other. "But you know," Emily continued, "even without her, we're lucky." "Are we?" "Yes. Some people have one family. We have 2. Lila smiled, squeezing her sister's hand. "And we have each other." They went back to their project, drawing and coloring in comfortable silence, sometimes laughing at a private joke, sometimes just existing together, as if making up for 10 lost years. Robert quietly approached the half-open bedroom door. The girls were so engrossed in their project that they didn't notice his presence. He stood there watching Emily, his daughter who for so long had lived like a stranger under his own roof. She was smiling as she drew a free and genuine smile he had rarely seen before. Every now and then, she would poke Lila or whisper something that made them both laugh. There was a lightness to her now, a carefree joy that contrasted sharply with the serious, quiet girl she had been. Robert felt something expand in his chest as he watched. It wasn't just love. He had always loved Emily, even when he didn't know how to show it. It was something more. Pride in the person she was becoming, gratitude for having a second chance, and a deep, unexpected sense of peace. For years, he had measured success in numbers, acquisitions, closed deals. Now, he realized how empty those achievements were compared to this simple moment. His daughter, happy, part of a real family, loved for who she truly was. "So are you ready to eat?" he finally called, knocking softly on the door. The twins looked up simultaneously, with identical smiles. "Almost done," Lila replied. "Just 5 more minutes," Emily added. "All right, we'll be waiting at the table." As he walked back to the kitchen, Robert thought about how his life had changed. 6 months ago, Saturday dinners meant business meetings at expensive restaurants or, more often, working late at the office while Emily ate alone. Now, here he was, about to sit down at the table with his daughter, her twin sister, and her parents who, in some strange and wonderful way, had become his extended family. At the table, as everyone settled in and passed around platters of food, Robert looked at the faces around him. Mark and Sarah, who had opened their home and their hearts, even after everything he represented to them. Lila, who had brought joy and transformation to Emily's life, and Emily, his daughter, who was finally smiling like the child she deserved to be. There was no elaborate party. There were no expensive gifts. There were no banners or fancy decorations like the ones he used to order to make up for his absence on her birthdays. But there was sincere laughter. There was real conversation. There were hands that touched as they passed the bread. There were knowing glances between the twins. There was presence, true, attentive, present. And for the first time, Robert Parker understood. This was enough. This was everything.